A big thank you to all of my listeners. And if you would like to support this transmission even more and boost your trading account, go to trendfollowing.com/now. And without any further delay, on to today's show. This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Covel. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. My guest today is Morgan Wright. He's an internationally recognized expert on cybersecurity strategy, cyberterrorism, identity theft, and privacy. That would be everything that all of us worry about using our devices all day long. Worried that some guy in Nigeria is going to hijack our entire life and screw us over. Morgan brings insights across wide territory inside security. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Morgan Wright. You're a tough guy to prepare for because there's a lot of different directions I can go. I mean, seriously. I don't know if I want to call it different directions, but there's a lot of layers to your world and a lot of different angles that people might not at first think they're connected, but for me, I look at your world, it all looks connected to me. I relate to a lot of it, and I want to share something with you because I was just thinking this is probably the best place for me to start. At least it's something that's really interesting to me because you talk about the notion of security and protecting from the insider. And I want to give an angle on that I've seen across my career. I can't tell you, I'd say I'm probably up to 3 or 4 individuals that were probably decently well-known names in my industry that at one time or another disguised themselves to try and come at me in some way. They used false identities, whatnot. Now, they clearly didn't know much about technology because they didn't realize the footprint they were leaving. And I wasn't exactly Mr. Cybersecurity, but it's pretty easy to figure out who they were. And I think it's an interesting thought that I don't think many people today, and that's an element of security for sure, but many people today don't think about that often that troll or that person that's causing you a problem that might just appear to be an anonymous whoever could very well be a competitor, could be someone on the inside. I mean, security really requires you to take a step back and imagine the possibilities, doesn't it?
It does. And look, it's the art of the possible. I mean, for so long, everybody has thought about, they've become too dependent upon technology. They thought, oh, well, we have a firewall, we have antivirus and stuff. And what they don't realize is that people continue to be they're your biggest strength with your biggest weakness. And whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it's kind of this old personal development saying the mind can achieve. There are thousands and countless of ways people are trying to figure out how to scam the system, scam you, break in, obtain information. Just when you think you've seen it all, somebody goes, nothing surprises you anymore because people have become so creative. Criminals have become so creative. The problem is it's a failure of imagination. They said that after the 9/11 Commission hearings. They said what we had here basically was a failure of imagination. We couldn't imagine it happening, therefore we didn't prepare for it or we didn't protect against it. And that's what I see now. I mean, it's coming full circle as we think that, hey, our technology is going to protect us, and the bad guys and girls and the nation states and the other people are figuring out, hey, sometimes the easiest way is just go bribe somebody. I'll get past your firewalls and all your security. I'll just go bribe somebody.
There's another direction here I'd like to go on this. As you mentioned, the bad guys, the criminals. Technology has also up the ante, so to speak. And it used to be back in the day, you could imagine perhaps who the bad guy was. Maybe he had less education. He was on the streets doing something bad. It was a stick up or whatnot. But today, a lot of these cyber criminals, these are some very bright people. These could be the people literally living next door to you, and their entire net worth is based on a scam.
The old joke was Willie Sutton was a bank robber. The quote was attributed to him, but it says, Willie, why do you rob banks? He says, because that's where the money is. Now I can rob banks. I can do things. I don't even have to physically be there. To your point, It could be the millionaire next door, it could be the criminal next door, or it could be the millionaire in Romania or Eastern Europe or Russia or China. What technology has done, look, the internet has no concept of distance. So we've removed all these barriers. I don't have to be there anymore. You worry about the guy next door. You go to the bank, you only have to worry. If your bank's going to get robbed, you got to worry about somebody physically being there if it's going to be a physical bank robbery. But you know what? Think of the bank in Bangladesh that just lost $81 million, or JP Morgan that got hacked here a while back, 76 million accounts, 7 million small businesses compromised. We've shrunk the world down to the point of where literally the criminal who may be halfway around the world might as well be next door, because that's how small of a world we've made things.
You know, Morgan, I usually don't get partisan on this show, but there's some political types that I don't care for too much. And I'm thinking of an example, as you mentioned, Romania, and a gentleman that was recently bragging in the press. And I would love for you to talk about the specifics, the technological specifics of how moronic this was. Just on a big picture standpoint, if you or I were Secretary of State and we had a server in our bathroom, unsecured, with classified information, state secrets running across it, without really letting the appropriate people inside government even know that this nonsense was going on, the way that it was.
Full disclosure, I used to be a senior advisor for the Antiterrorism Assistance Program at the State Department. That's one of the things, we talked about is when I got my security clearance, was briefed in because I had clearances as well from DOD and DOJ, but you sign a non-disclosure agreement. You don't. It doesn't have to be marked as classified for you to have to protect the information. Yeah, you're right. The whole issue of this server being set up, is this plausible? Could this person have done what he said he did and gotten into the server? And not only could he have gotten into the server, there's a high probability that he exploited the information on there. Well, even though he said, I was just looking for something basically salacious, looking for gossip, which was kind of his MO. I believe he downloaded a lot of information, because he even mentioned he's got stuff sitting in Dropbox or Dropbox or out in the cloud somewhere. And there was some information he said he deleted. It was so radioactive, so sensitive that he didn't want to be in possession of it. Your point is well taken, is that this was a server that was set up by an IT guy that never should have been set up, never should have run. None of this information ever should have gone out. And they said, well, look, the State Department network wasn't secure. Yeah, you know what? That's a fact of life, and that's something you need to deal with. That's why you need to make sure you stay on the classified networks. It was the unclassified system that was getting broken into quite a bit. But you know what? You don't get to make the rules. You don't get to, this isn't wiffle ball where you change the rules. One day it's this and one day it's that. We all have to live under these rules. And if you go back and look at the amount of spend during her tenure the State Department did on cybersecurity, they ranked pretty much dead last in the federal government for their spending on cybersecurity. So it could have been improved. It could have been taken. And it's, this is a risk of doing business in this day and age. You think our systems are bad? I guarantee you our NSA and our other agencies, CIA and other folks, are breaking into other people's networks who are just as bad. We just don't talk about it, nor do those other countries publicize it in the way that we did.
Well, you make a great point. I'm going to come back to this Clinton issue in a little while, but you make a great point as you go to talk about our agencies breaking in. We always hear on the news, and it makes me always feel like, what are we, a bunch of, whining wimps? China broke into our servers and stole state secrets. Hold on. Was our security that bad that we allowed China to break into our servers and steal state secrets, and then we tell everybody they did it? The whole story never really adds up for me.
Well, no, I was a victim of that. My clearance, one of what they call Standard Form 86, this was one of the ones compromised, the 21 million records. Yeah, not only were they in there, the Chinese were in that system for over a year, siphoning information off because they couldn't detect the breach. Even James Clapper, the Director of National Intelligence, when he was testifying, said, hey, look, I didn't like the way he said it. He said hats off, but he basically acknowledges that what they did was a legitimate objective of foreign counterintelligence, and their offensive operations, which was, hey, get our information. Yeah, they broke. OPM was so riddled with holes. I'm telling you, Swiss cheese had a better chance of stopping the Chinese than the OPM network did. And now they've been fired from doing the job. Now that is all being handled by the military. So when you go to the Office of Personnel and Management, when you go to look up information or submit information, it's now a .mil server, because the DoD spends far more money. They're not perfect, but let me tell you what, they're orders of magnitude better than anybody in the civilian federal government.
Did you ever have a thought? I mean, because like I said, it's always positioned in the media that we should hate China because they did this. But I always think, my gosh, why did we let them do this? Did you have a thought in your head of like, gee, the evil Chinese, or did you immediately look inward as part of the people involved and say, hey, we made a mistake?
Both. I mean, look, I knew a long time ago. I had been talking about, I remember going back probably 6 years on an interview I did with Bill Hemmer on Fox News, where we talked about the Joint Strike Fighter intrusion, the Los Alamos lab intrusion. I was warning back then. I said, look, the Chinese, don't underestimate them. They've got an up-and-coming role. And so we've known about this for a long time, so shame on us for not doing something about it. Yeah, we got some problems we need to fix. But on the other hand, we knew that they were targeting us, and why we didn't defend against that is incompetence. Somebody should have been fired. Heads should have rolled. But it is so tough to fire people in the federal government. It's even tougher to sue the federal government because of the sovereignty issue. So I think if you treated senior executive service folks, what they call the SES, they're kind of like the executives in a company, your vice presidents, your senior vice presidents. If they treated them the same way that you're treated in the private sector, which means you can be sued, you can be fired. A board of directors, look, they fired the CEO and CIO of Target after that data breach. They have fired people. Apple fired one of their SVPs just after they rolled out Apple Maps, and it was a total fiasco. You think you can do that to somebody in the federal government? You got a better chance of seeing God. We do have to change some things in terms of accountability. If you want to change things, change the accountability. The minute people start realizing there's real consequences for the stupid things that they do, they'll quit doing stupid things.
Let's get to brass tacks. Email, something most of us still use every day.
Yep.
Talk about security with email. What we think we have is secure, and what is the reality on the ground?
There used to be a joke said, don't say anything in email you don't want broadcast, put on the front page of the New York Times. So most people, I guarantee you, especially personal accounts, their password sucks. I mean, that's your first line of defense. There's no better way to say it, or no easier way to say it. I mean, in one of my presentations, I talk about that. I say, look, your password stinks. It's a pile of manure. The reason being is because we are creatures of habit. It's human. We want to use the same password for everything. So your same password for your Gmail account is most likely your same password for Facebook, your same password for your online banking, your 401k account, whatever it is. So from an email standpoint, one of the best ways to protect email, you're seeing Yahoo initiated it. Google's following. It's the issue of two-factor authentication or positive authentication. For example, Yahoo now it's tied to your personal device, your cell phone, your mobile device, your smartphone, that if you log into your email, it sends you a message that says, hey, you're logging into your email. Did you intend to do that? And you go, yes. So you simply click a yes, and now you're able to log into your email. That makes it very difficult for a bad guy or bad girl, to break into the account. Google, and something I use a lot, all of my email is on Google. I use Google Mail for that. It's $5 a person, $5 an account, basically. And it comes with what's called Google Authenticator. It's two-factor authentication, and for two-factor authentication, that's another layer of security. So the authenticator has a 6-digit number that recycles every 30 seconds. And so for you to log in, if you're on your trusted computer at home and it's your computer, you don't have to do that every single time. About every 30 days, it'll just check to make sure. But let's say you go to a cafe somewhere and you're in Pakistan and you want to log into your Gmail account. It's going to say, you're logging in from Pakistan. I don't recognize this computer or this location. You have to provide your authenticator. So it's another layer of security. Email, but I'll tell you, now that's on the security side. However, email continues, though, Michael, to be the biggest way to steal money from a company. You want to steal money from a company without firing a shot, without having to break into their network? Send them an email and ask for it. And don't think I'm kidding. Ubiquity Networks in Mountain View, California, I believe, or maybe it's just right out San Francisco. A lot of smart people in that company. They make wireless equipment. The owner of the company is also the owner of the Memphis Grizzlies. Through email, through spear phishing, and through social engineering and deception, they got the company to transfer $46.7 million to another account simply because they convinced somebody inside the company that the CEO was asking them to send money. That's not even the biggest one. The biggest one right now is being worked out of the Southern District of New York. $98 million. They were able to claw back about $76 million of it. They're still going after it. But simply somebody identified who the third-party payment processor was for the company. They sent them an email, said, hey, look, we're changing our bank account information. Here it is. They changed the bank account information, and for a week, about $100 million was transferred to a bank somewhere near China. So email is, from a security standpoint, it's still an issue, but from an attack standpoint, it's one of the best ways and easiest ways to attack somebody.
The two-factor, I have to say, the first time I was thrown that my way a couple years ago from my bank, I used to bitch and moan the whole time. And now I use it for everything. And now I expect it, and there's a level of comfort with it. Yes, it adds a few more steps, but the two-factor is seriously one of the greatest innovations of the last 5, 6, 7 years.
Well, look, it's been out there for a long time. People just never used it. I was using it back in 2000. We had the little RSA secure ID token. So if you wanted to log in under your VPN, you also had to have that. But I'll tell you, it hasn't become mainstream because, to your point, there wasn't enough pain. But I'll tell you, people can go to a site. It's called Two-Factor Auth, TWO Factor Auth, AUTH.org, and that lists every company, every bank. I'm pretty close as far as I can tell. Anybody who uses any form of two-factor authentication. I have, I think, last count, about 20 different services and sites where I use two-factor authentication. Everything from Amazon to Dropbox to Evernote. I mean, you name it. All of my Google accounts, Buffer, my WordPress. I've even set up two-factor authentication on my WordPress. If you try and log into my WordPress site, but if you try and do it, it sends a text message to my phone. I have to log in with my password and then an additional set of characters and numbers. Look, it's like putting on a seatbelt. At first, people bitch, but after a while, when it becomes just commonplace and you're doing it all the time, you don't even think about it. You're just doing it. But you bring up a very good point. People gripe and moan, but I'll tell you want to gripe and moan about something? Wait till you spend. The average victim of ID theft can spend 400 to 600 hours recovering their ID. You really want to gripe and moan about something? Think about how much time you'll spend if you don't put this in place and you have to fix a problem. It's cheap insurance up front, and most of the time, almost every solution for two-factor authentication is free.
This morning, I received at least one request on Skype from a screen name and a face that appeared to be a cute, alluring woman who I never have seen before. And on my email, I got at least 5 emails that I at first thought looked like Amazon receipts, but they had Word docs attached and they went straight to the delete box. I mean, hey, folks, Amazon's not sending you a Word doc attachment. So.
Well, I got to tell you, I keep all of these junk emails. So let me see. I have Google telling me I had a message blocked. I have Wilma from FedEx telling me I have a notice here. I have customer service. I have find the attached document you requested. I have people asking me for money saying, oh, we found a broken image. View this image. Let me see your balance and recent transaction. Dear client, we're writing concerning the outstanding account for $4,938.32, which was due to be paid on May 1st. I mean, so yeah, guess what? They're either all zip files or PDF files. None of them are good.
People might be laughing, but a significant number, and I think back to probably 1994, 1995, when I got my first Nigerian scam email. And honestly, that first few minutes, I thought, hey, this is interesting. And I remember calling someone, they're like, you moron. But I mean, in my defense, that's nearly 20 years ago. But today, that scam is only done consistently because it works. And most of the people that probably get caught up in it, they're not necessarily not intelligent people. They just get caught up. It could be your neighbor, it could be your friend, family member, but a lot of people have lost a lot of money to that scam.
And let me tell you, the number one scam right now online that people are losing money to, it's the confidence scam, the romance scams. They tend to target women between 55 and 65, those who are recently widowed, divorced, might have, separated. Women are, and this is, and I know there's some folks listening in when they do, this is not a knock against men or women. It's if you understand how these hackers, scammers, and thieves work, they are predators is what they are. They understand how to play on emotions. Women tend to be more emotional. So if you can play to a woman's emotions, you'll be able to con money out of her. Guys, on the other hand, it's like you were saying, send me a sexy picture of a 25-year-old from Russia that says, I love you, comrade. I would like to come to America and meet you. You get guys, it appeals to their ego, to their vanities. If you understand how to appeal to people, and look, Michael, one of the things I used to teach was behavior analysis. I spent some time teaching out at the National Security Agency to the damage assessment agents in the Ames, Nicholson, Pitts espionage cases. I taught law enforcement. One of the things you understand is when you go in to interview somebody is you understand their motivations, what motivates them. Men are different than women. You look at what things do they have to lose status. So when these folks are online, they are the worst kind of people. They are predators. They're looking to prey upon your emotions, your fears. It'll be this conversation. It'll start up. And then boom, before you know it, for example, like the Nigerian letters, like to your exact point, why do they keep sending them out? Because they keep working because people want something easy. Oh, I can get $50 million. All I have to do is send you 500. Well, there's a guy, I wish I would have looked this up before we did this today. I'll find it. I'll send you the link later. But there was a guy in Britain, just the cheeky sense of British humor. But he wrote a book where he replied to all these scammers and he collected lots of responses. And one of them was a lawyer who said, hey, my client is going to transfer 15, 20 million to you. So he was going back and forth. Well, they said, well, then my client died. He says, well, look, I'm in London. I'll just come by and visit. And it was so funny because he just kept calling this guy out on a scam, but the scammer didn't know he was being scammed. But unfortunately, in that romance scam, I think just so far, and I think in the last 8 months, if I remember the FBI statistics right, $85 million has been lost in these online scams. You'll get a lady who's emotionally vulnerable. They'll say, hey, I want to come visit you. I love you. Oh, my aunt just needed surgery, or I need a plane ticket pretty soon. Some of these cases are $25 to $50 to $100,000 these folks have lost. I mean, they dip into their life savings. They've mortgaged their house because they've been sucked in and they're vulnerable. And these are the worst kind of predators. I mean, if I ever met one of these folks in person in real life, I'd probably need some bail money.
And to add to that thought, I know someone that got caught up in one of these kind of, I think it was actually a Chinese one, but the way they say they're going to give you something, this huge amount of money, but what they need from you first is a smaller amount of money to help make the deal get started. So if people are curious how those things go down, they promise you 50 million, but then you got to put 20 grand in to open the bank account and you never see the 20 grand again.
Never see it again. And that's the scam. They get you thinking about, hey, I want something on the back end. And then what happens on the front end? You think, oh, well, if I give you $500, that's no big deal because look, this is about telling a story. What they do is they tell the story, they build it up, they build facts, they make it sound legitimate because they're giving you little details a little bit at a time. And then boom, once you put enough fact, if you've ever read a good thriller, for example, Tom Clancy, when he was still alive. I mean, I loved his books because they were so full of detail. They just made you believe is that, hey, the speed of the Mark 7, torpedo is about 48 knots. And I had an FBI agent, former Navy guy, says, how do you know that? I said, well, it's classified. I can't tell you. Well, I read it out of Tom Clancy. He was so good about building up the story, building up the legend, is that when he finally then delivered the climax to it, which is for these hackers and scammers, it's the ask. Now it's, hey, I want to ask you something. You're bought into this 100%. So what they also are effective storytellers.
Let's talk iPhone. And I want to go back to your behavioral work with the NSA. I want to probe there, and I want to talk about healthcare as well, because I think you have some insights there. But the iPhone is, I think, something near and dear to everyone. There's a lot of opinions about it right now. I hear these political opinions that diverge. Why don't you go ahead and give the brief synopsis for both sides of the coin? So why the government says they should be able to get in, and why Apple says, hey, we're not letting you in. And then I'd love to hear your view as well.
Sure. So let's talk about the government standpoint first. I actually had the chance to listen to Loretta Lynch out at the RSA Security Conference talk about this, and I've listened to Director Comey from the FBI talk about this. Look, no one company should be able to dictate the national security policy of the United States. I mean, not Northrop Grumman, not General Dynamics, not SAIC, not Lockheed Martin, nor should Apple or Google. And so what their theory is that, look, you have been given a lawful court order. Now, see, here's the one nuance. People think it's coming from the FBI. It's not. It's an order signed by a court, by a judge. The FBI just can't come to Apple and give them this court order and say, hey, you need to do this. There's a difference between that and national security letters. That's a different issue. But for them to it is a court order, so a judge has looked at it objectively, independently, and said, yes, there's probable cause to believe that a crime has been committed and that these particular people committed this crime, and this is the object of this crime is this iPhone, and there's enough to believe that there's information on there, so they compel them, they give them an order to work with the FBI. People need to remember, the FBI has to still go to a judge. It's a judge who issues the order. So that's the government side. Now, from the private sector side, it's very easy. Does anybody trust the government? I mean, look, after the NSA debacle where we found out that whether they may have had the letters of authority and the right to do it, but I mean, when you're breaking into Google's data center, Microsoft, And it's not so much that they broke in. There are some cases if it's going overseas where you're looking at, hey, I'm sure they'd love to get that information. It's when Edward Snowden put out that information, it was simply the arrogance of the people at NSA and the other places, the way they arrogantly went about. Do you realize that you're breaking in to the people's lives who have information stored on there? This is something you should take. This should be just like a church ceremony, a very reverent church ceremony. You should consider the impact of what it is you're doing. So from a government standpoint, I think the private sector has little trust for the government. They have been backstabbed, in many, many ways. And the other thing too is it's really kind of impossible to put a scheme out there that says, hey, look, we're going to escrow, which means we'll put into a safe box, a lockbox, all the encryption keys, and we'll only dip into those encryption keys to decrypt a message, or a document only when we have an authorization from a court. To build something like that, the NSA wanted to do it years ago, called the Clipper chip. It's just not practical. And, I don't agree with everything Tim Cook said, but one of the things he did say, where he talked about, there's a lot of overreach by government. I don't think anybody believes that the government could keep this stuff safe and secure. All you have to do is look at OPM. You have to look at the 21 million records that are gone. You look at all these other things. Nobody believes the government can secure the information. I mean, that's both sides. My view of this is I come down, look, I'm a law and order guy. I still believe in defense. I'm a sheepdog. So there are sheep, wolves, and sheepdogs. And the sheepdogs stand between the wolf and the sheep to protect them. Look, there's some nice people out there, but some of these folks are sheep. They need these sheepdogs. They need the military. They need law enforcement. They need our first responders. And so I think companies have an obligation. The same country that provided them the opportunity to build a business and to operate the way they do. Look, you try operating in China or Russia or Venezuela right now, or some of these places where companies have been taken over and nationalized. I think a lot of people should thank their lucky stars above and kiss the ground that their buildings are built on, that they're operating their businesses out of the United States. That being said, though, I think this is where the partnership has to come into place. I think the private sector and the government got to come together and figure this problem out. We can't draw such hard lines in the sand is that we can't come to a compromise and figure out how to do this. Companies need to figure out, how do we still achieve the same objective without giving up all this privacy? Government needs to say, how do we still achieve the same objective without putting at risk information of their customers and what makes them valuable? It's kind of I don't think there's any good answer. It requires the wisdom of Solomon, to figure out how to, split the baby. I just don't know that we'll be able to do that in this case.
My first thought when government started coming down, I could only think ego, because I didn't understand. I knew Apple was saying, we're not letting you in, but government made it very public. And that felt very odd to me, because you just made some great points about countries that go nationalistic on their interior companies and kind of take them over. And I really thought that it was kind of a nasty shot across the bow. But beside that, I think about the unintended consequences of government saying, we will get into this one iPhone. It seems like to me that every enterprising programmer is now sitting out there and saying, I want to beat the government. I want to solve Tim Cook's problem. I will solve Tim Cook's problem. I mean, there's guys sitting there right now coding that are figuring out ways that they'll never get caught with their pants down again. Isn't that part of the unintended consequences?
Yeah, it is. It's a slippery slope. So now, but you have people on both sides. So you have people on the other hand saying, hey, look, I'll show you how to get past anything Apple puts together. And you have the other people going, I'm going to show you how the government will never, ever be able to hack this again. But here's the dirty little secret. There's no such thing as perfect security. You will never be able to lock down an iPhone to the point is that nobody can get access to it, that you can't retrieve information. Anytime you have enough time and money, you'll figure out how to solve the problem. Look, getting to the moon was a very complex problem, but we still put people up there with a computer that had basically 384K of RAM. Yeah, very complex things can be done. So there will never be a time. I think what we have to do is weigh. Look, safety, security, privacy is a pendulum. Before 9/11, the pendulum was to one side where everybody was, hey, it's okay, government, we're doing fine, nothing really bad is happening, keep our information secure and stuff. Then 9/11 happened, and then that pendulum swung the other way. Now you're saying we had the Patriot Act, hey, we want to look at terrorism financing, we want to do a better job of screening people. The only problem with that mentality is we're fighting yesterday's battle, yesterday's war, again, a failure of imagination. So I think this whole issue of privacy and security goes back and forth. Look, for example, in San Bernardino, 14 people dead, 22 people seriously wounded. What the FBI did, I think from a marketing standpoint, was actually quite brilliant. They used that fact against Apple and made them kind of take a stand. My stance on that was back to Apple as well, was look, you're the CEO of a company. 14 of your employees have just been killed. 22 have just been wounded. You have the ability to unlock a device to give law enforcement information to determine, is anybody else at threat? Is anybody going to be killed? And you say no. You know, it's easy to say no when it's not your people. Here's the other thing is, get these CEOs to come out and sign a pledge that says, hey, look, no matter what happens, even if it's my family and my children, we're not going to cooperate with the government.
You're making tough points. I mean, the way you say it, I think most people listening are probably going to say, you know, I have my philosophical view about Apple and keeping their security, but the way you say it, I mean, you definitely cause people to pause and say, well, hold on, let me think about the government side again. It's tricky, huh?
Not only is it tricky, it is something that will never, ever be solved. Not in my lifetime, not in the next lifetime, and how many times I might be reincarnated. You know, this will never get solved. We should always have this kind of tension and contention, because you never want to get to the point of where there is absolute... Look, I think one of the issues, and I'm not going to get political, I'm just going to make an observation, but one of the reasons Donald Trump is going to be the presumptive nominee is I think it's less about whether or not he's got the political skills. I think you're finding people who are fed up with the system. And so every now and then the tree of liberty must be refreshed with the blood of patriots and tyrants. People are refreshing the tree of liberty. Will it cost them an election? We don't know. Is it going to cost some politicians some jobs? Probably. But I think people are tired of the status quo. And anytime that happens, whether it's safety, security, privacy, or politics, people eventually rise up and they say, look, we've had enough of this and we're going to do something about it. I was trying to think, the movie with Gene Hackman and Denzel Washington on the USS Alabama, Crimson Tide. They, you know, where they had the breakdown in the system. Look, to launch nuclear weapons, you talk about two-factor authentication. There's a ton of it going on there. But it's a system built on trust and a command structure and the National Command Authority and having orders that come down. And so when that broke down, one of the things, I think it was Jason Robards, he said, this is the question which will occupy this board for the next few years. These are serious philosophical questions. And you're right, whether Apple complies, which they didn't do, so the FBI still got past it. But what happens when we get the iPhone 8 and the iPhone 9 and the iPhone 10 and iOS 27, you know, somewhere down the road, all of these things? Will we ever have perfect security? No. As long as there have been locks, there have been lock pickers, and there have been, you know, pickpockets. So there'll be other ways to get this data.
How much different would it have been if Tim Cook was facing an issue of, you know, we were facing 14 lives? What if he was facing an issue of 100,000 lives?
You bring up a very good point, because let me preface it with one thing, and then let's talk about that. I think most people don't realize it unless you go back and look at the Apple website. Apple was unlocking phones up until I think it was the 5C. All you had to do was send in the phone and a hard drive or USB drive that was double the size of the storage of the phone. They would unlock it, copy the data for you, and send it back to you. I mean, they were doing this as a matter of course. So here's the question. What changed? What made it different? I think there's a lot of things. There's the Snowden effect. There's politics. There's optics from other countries. Right now, Apple, for example, in China had some of their services suspended. And in fact, iTunes in China, if you want to do anything in China, they say it's secure, but you have to store the data in China. It can't be stored in the U.S. You're right. Milton Friedman actually had an interesting exchange with a very young Michael Moore one time. You can find this on YouTube. And they were talking almost the exact same thing. They're talking about the Pinto and the dangers that the Pinto had and how much money had to be spent, you know, to fix the problem. And a young Michael Moore, of course, is trying to say, hey, look, the government needs to fix this. They got to do this, you know. And Milton Friedman's point was, okay, well, how much would you spend? Look, you know, is it a $5 problem? What if it cost an extra $2,000? He said, well, no, I wouldn't pay that. He said, well, then what you're saying is that there is a certain point to where we do place a value on life. What is that? You basically, when you see that interaction, it got down to the point is that nobody wanted to add $2,000 to the price of a car to solve the problem. So they were willing, if they understood the risk, to take the risk. In this case, look, how many lives does it take? Don't know. It's kind of like how many hairs on your chin constitute a whisker? I don't know, but I can tell you when you have a beard, you know, how many constitute a beard. So sometimes it becomes very subjective. I think what will happen is the people buying the phones and the consumers will dictate. Right now, they seem to be okay with it. I think there's I'm against Tim Cook's stand, but I still buy Apple. I'm not going to penalize, you know, the device. I may not buy something, but but hey, look, it's for me. I can vote my conscience. I can go buy something else. I doubt I'll buy an Android, but so I have my own dilemma there. I'm too hooked on Apple right now.
I forgot all about that clip. I wasn't sure if that was more or not, or that was just kind of a tale. I'll have to go back and check that clip out again. Hey, one thing I want to ask real quick. I think I saw this mentioned a few years back. Maybe last year. CENTCOM was hacked by ISIS, their Twitter and YouTube account. Was the solution is something as simple as the two-factor?
Not CENTCOM itself, but their YouTube and their Twitter account. By the way, I had a chance to actually visit MacDill, got a tour of the place. We got a briefing down there. Really cool stuff. But it was being managed by somebody who did not use two-factor authentication to secure their Twitter account and their YouTube account. Somebody was able to either exploit the password, a security feature, or guess it, or compromise, some credentials somewhere else. We just gave a rocket launcher to people who previously were only armed with a slingshot. Propaganda is one of the most effective tools, the most powerful tools. It's one of the things that fuels all these people that are joining ISIS are doing it because of propaganda. They're seeing, and look, as far as 98% of the rest of the world knows, or they believe ISIS hacked CENTCOM itself, which they didn't do. What they hacked were the social media accounts tied to CENTCOM. But that's a distinction lost on 98% of the people ISIS is trying to recruit.
Well, I might add to it also that I think it's more than just propaganda. I think they're actually losers that are crazy. So I'll go even more hardcore on them.
Well, I have my own views on that too, but you're absolutely right. I mean, these are folks that are searching for relevance in their life. They're told this siren song by somebody, hey, come fight the infidels. Let me tell you, folks, anybody out there thinking of joining ISIS, it's not what you think it is. It's not as sexy as what you think it is. And if you're a woman, just forget it. And if you're a guy, you're a commodity. And look, at the end of the day, most of those folks are either going to be captured or killed. They're just tools.
I'm out of luck. If my audience is possibly ISIS members, I'm in trouble.
You got some strange demographics, my friend. Yeah.
Hey, let me go back to, you mentioned NSA, teaching some there. What I've seen you call it a behavioral analysis interviewing. Talk about the NSA, some perhaps even a little bit of a definition for those that are not familiar, fairly secretive organization. But talk about what you were teaching there and talk about some of the logic going on.
Sure. Up until probably I'm trying to think of the time frame now, maybe 95, 96, the NSA, actually the existence was classified. I have business cards from two gentlemen. Actually, one of them is still there. I ran into somebody from NSA at a security conference, found out he was still there. So I got some of their first business cards. So the National Security Agency, actually, its job is to intercept every type of communications, electronic signals intelligence, all of these different, what they call INT intelligence, ELINT, SIGINT, comment, all of the communications. Their job is to intercept stuff globally. So they intercept everything from email and encrypted traffic to, voice communications, cell phone communications. That's part of our national defense is be able to understand what's going on. So when we start talking about terrorist chatter and stuff, a lot of that is really NSA picking up communications and signals intelligence around the world. So they're based out of Fort Meade, Maryland. Primarily, Fort Meade is an Army base, but NSA is staffed by, every discipline up there. But when I was talking up there, I taught up at the National Cryptologic School. One of the reasons being is anytime you have an espionage case, they do what they call damage assessment. How bad was the damage? Aldrich Ames, Robert Hansen, what things happen. A lot of the times what they use polygraphs. So they have these guys called polygraphers, and they come in. If you go back and you read the history of Aldrich Ames, I had the chance to meet several people from the CIA. I was very honored to meet a gentleman named Jim Olson, 36 years in the clandestine service. He actually worked on the investigation of Aldrich Ames. Ames was able to defeat the system, not exactly the polygraph. The polygraph registered correctly. It was the interpretation of it. And they gave him the benefit of the doubt and passed him on questions which indicated deception. So one of the things it indicated to him is we were becoming too dependent on technology and we needed to improve our people skills. Well, a properly trained interviewer that utilizes both verbal and nonverbal behavior and has access and command of the case facts, it's been proven through a study of 300 cases at the NSA, you can be correct in determining truthful or deceptive behavior 93% of the time, to where a polygraph scientifically maybe is only accurate to 86 to 87%. That was part of the thing we're doing, is teaching people how to recognize behavior, how to recognize deception, how to drill down on it, how to bring it out, how to create that anxiety, manifest that anxiety internally, to where the only way to get rid of that anxiety was to tell the truth. And that's how you get confessions out of criminals and people who've committed crimes, is you manifest anxiety to the point, behaviors to the point of where the only way to get rid of it is you have to tell the truth to get rid of that gut, that big knot in your stomach. So that's part of what we did up there. And they have a lot of missions when they have a breach in security, when you have an Aldrich James or an Earl Edmund Pitts, who is an FBI agent, or a Harold James Nicholson, a CIA operative. What an idiot. He started spying for the Russians right at the time they were arresting Aldrich James. What better way to, bring scrutiny on yourself than to start spying at the same time they've got the biggest mole ever in CIA histories. But that's what they were concerned about. So that's part of what, but the real quick relation to technology is, guess what? Everything we're talking about, a lot of it deals with human behavior. If you understand how to manipulate human behavior, you can be effective at social engineering, scamming people, getting money out of them. And so part of what my mission is, I want to train people how to put that shield up, how to get their shields up, just like the old Spartan warriors. Shields up, how to have a posture that still allows you to work, but is defensive enough to where you can deflect these incoming attacks on you, your business, your identity, your data.
Let me add to your behavioral analysis a bit, something that I think you could probably even add more to what I'm about to say. So I own property in Vienna, Virginia. I actually know the exact corner that Robert Hansen was arrested on. I drive by it all the time when I'm in the town. And to add to that, I actually know someone very well who is a doctor, and two of his patients over the last many years, one was Hansen, same doctor, and one was the Virginia Tech killer.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting is to know this doctor, to know many of his staff, and not just a hindsight bias, but everyone that came in contact with these two people knew from a behavioral standpoint they were whack jobs. There was something wrong with them. These were not, the Virginia Tech killer, everyone knew that this kid was batshit crazy. Everyone knew that Hansen was an egotistical maniac. But what's interesting is here we are talking about human behavior. It's like, who no one was paying attention. The basics of what you're talking about.
Yeah, funny you mention that, because you're talking about Foxstone Park over in Virginia. In fact, Hansen was such a creature of habit, all of his dead drops were up and down that whole area there, which is actually a violation of good tradecraft. But I actually worked with some of my former students in computer crime investigation and behavior training, actually worked across the hall from Hansen. There was always something wrong with him. His wife caught him spying. You go back, you read the history. There were at least a couple people, including, I believe, a brother or a brother-in-law, that knew he was spying. And some of this information got lost, so it's kind of it got lost in the system thing. But yeah, he should have been caught much, much earlier than he did. And you do look at the Virginia Tech killer, Cho, I believe his last name was, mentally ill. This is one of the greatest problems we have right now in the U.S., where we talk about, you can be on, I'm not going to talk to you about should you be for or against guns. What I'm saying is that the law as it is right now is that you can buy weapons. The point is, mentally ill people who are a danger to themselves or other, should not be allowed to buy weapons. No law enforcement person will dispute that. I still know a lot of these guys. The problem is hooking up the legal system and the mental health system together to where that information could be disclosed. Look, Charles Krauthammer, who's a contributor at Fox, writes for the Washington Post, was actually a psychiatrist. And one of his quotes was, he said, look, one of the greatest disservices we did to the mentally ill is when we mainstreamed them, when we started deinstitutionalizing them. That allowed people to get out. It is very difficult to integrate and mainstream people into society who are mentally ill. Look at the homeless and some of the other folks. They don't want to be helped. So Cho, absolutely, all the indicators were there, but that information was never shared with the same people who could have prevented this or potentially prevented this from happening.
Having spent a lot of time in Asia now, but most recently in San Diego, Southern California, even all the way up to San Francisco, and this is kind of a side note away from cybersecurity and security, but the homeless situation isn't just people choosing to live on the street. It's really people they're no longer there. That they've lost their marbles and they're just out on the street. And all you need to do is go to any of these big Southern California cities. It's sad.
San Diego had a project they won some awards for and were recognized for, as well as Houston and other places, dealing with the homeless, which, quite frankly, the majority of homeless people, as you say, are mentally ill. And how do you deal with them? How do you mainstream them? It's a huge issue. I mean, that is one of the things that will occupy us as well for years, discussing that issue.
Let me bring it back to security, so I don't go off on too many tangents. We can cover a lot of ground clearly in our conversation, and I'm just probably scratching the surface of where you can go. The year when you were before Congress on Healthcare.gov, when was this? What year?
No, November 2013.
Okay, so this is a pretty big thing, and we've got a situation where the government is all of a sudden in the business of collecting, frankly, everyone's personal healthcare data, enough to make everyone just kind of go, oh man. Talk about the New York Times thing you said in the beginning. I mean, I really think that's probably eventually going to be the case about healthcare. Everyone's going to know everything. But why don't you talk about how you ended up in front of Congress, the reason you were there, and the insights you were bringing about the lack of security on these personal healthcare details.
One of the staffers on the committees reached out. I came down for an interview. We talked because, they're obviously going to vet people and make sure that if they put somebody up as a witness, that you can withstand the scrutiny from the other members, because they do look into your background. Look, this is just like being in court, which I've done hundreds of times. You subject yourself to cross-examination. There's the prosecution and there's the defense. So in this case, the prosecution was the Republicans because they were the majority in Congress, and the defense was the minority members, the Democrats. But we had 4 witnesses, 3 invited by the majority, 1 by the minority. But to a person, we all said that we didn't believe the system was secure, that it should not have been launched. And one of the ways I looked at it, look, a good friend of mine now, I met him there, but Dave Kennedy, he actually did a demonstration to show how insecure the site was, doing a SQL injection attack. So basically, it's a way that you can go into part of the search functions and stuff, type in some commands and expose data. Well, he was able to expose a ton of data on a system that was currently live. I talked with him. Part of what I looked at is I said, look, if I was a criminal, how would I attack this? What information could I use? Then I looked at it from a management standpoint. I mean, I talked about their biggest problem, Michael, was the fact is they had no single throat to choke. Look, when I did large projects when I was in the private sector, but we did stuff for the government, I did stuff before 9/11 and after 9/11 with the intelligence community and the defense community and the justice community. We always made sure that they understood who the program manager was, who the project manager was, who was their throat to choke, who was the belly button to touch. In this case, there was nobody in charge. Well, look, when everybody's in charge, nobody's in charge. There's no accountability. There's no authority then for people to make decisions. You have to follow, it's the old structure of responsibility, accountability, authority. You have to put all of those in one place and give them to a person or somebody who's the head of something so they can make decisions. In the terms of healthcare.gov, a lot of the stuff that I testified about, not only was it, I believe, accurate at the time, it was later not only verified in an Inspector General report. Cheryl Atkinson, the reporter from CBS who was fired or, let go, but she wrote a book called Stonewalled because she was looking into healthcare.gov. She actually used one of my quotes from the testimony. What I said was that only in the federal government could a gaping hole like this be allowed to exist without any fear of consequence. And that was the problem. There was no accountability, just like with OPM, just like with other major data breaches at the IRS, you name it. There was no accountability. When I looked at it, my thing was to look at it from a process standpoint to say, look, is this a good process? Is this what people would do normally when they're building something this size? What started off as a $100 million project or $300 million, became $800 million. There was overspending because there was lack of control. There was lack of oversight. All of the things that all of us testified about, and from my testimony too, were later validated in an Inspector General report that was released about 6 months ago, talking about the problems with healthcare.gov. And now here's the one red herring. A lot of people go, well, look, they haven't been broken into, or we don't have any evidence they've been broken into. Look, let me tell you something. Nobody believed OPM was broken into until it was. There were only 2 kinds of networks out there, those that have been compromised and those that will be compromised. If you don't think, and I was brought in for a follow-up testimony about security and privacy when they had all of these different services running that were collecting all sorts of data And here's the thing that'll blow your mind. Some of you folks out there that are listening, if you go shopping or if you're giving some personal information, you're always looking at their website, and if not, you should be looking for that lock up there or that thing that shows you have an encrypted connection now, like before you give your credit card number to Amazon or Best Buy, or before you sign up for something, you're always looking for that secure socket level, that SSL certificate to make sure, hey, this connection is encrypted. Healthcare.gov, 2 years later, even though we told them about it 2 years ago, 2 years later, people were putting in their information to say, hey, look, I'm age this, I'm a smoker, I'm pregnant, I'm female, whatever. They were collecting enough information. None of that was encrypted. You got the brightest people in the world supposedly building this stuff, writing these laws, and they can't figure out 2 years later how to encrypt the connection when you start providing personally identifiable information. For that factor alone, people should have been taken out, summarily tried, and given a digital spanking of some type, or put in stocks and taunted and made fun of for at least a year. But none of that happened.
Can I add there, though? I don't really think you think they're the brightest people. I think the brightest technologists are somewhere out there in Palo Alto and Cupertino and whatnot. I think the folks in D.C., I think it's really an accountability issue, like you're saying, is that when you really have no one in charge, there's money just flowing like a spigot, nobody can be fired. It's just a really... It's a messy bureaucratic system that we've all, as voters, have allowed to develop over the years. And inside that beltway is just its own little universe. It doesn't work like the rest of the country. And frankly, it doesn't work like the rest of the country because it never has a never-ending supply of money.
Well, that was said sarcastically. I apparently didn't use enough sarcasm, and because here's the thing I loved is that when you go look at the testimony of other areas where they said, look, this law was written by the best and brightest. Well, the best and brightest overlooked certain factors about authorizations to establish state exchanges and who's going to fund. I mean, there's a huge flaw in the law that they had to go back and try and fix and get a court ruling on. So, yeah, my point is, there's an old saying, yesterday's technology tomorrow. That seems to be how the government works. A lot of the stuff they're putting into place is stuff we were using yesterday. I still expect somebody to establish a MySpace site for FAQs for Healthcare.gov. And so, I mean, this is how crazy it's getting. But initially, the people who did it, CGI, the original contractors, failed miserably. Accenture was awarded. Look,
imagine the house that those guys live in, though. I mean, the CEO; those guys are living high on the hog, I'm sure.
Imagine the sales conferences they had and the parties they threw. And look, there was a lot of political connections of why they got it. CGI is essentially a Canadian company that happened to have a U.S. presence. Well, look, Accenture is a Bermuda company that happens to have a U.S. presence. Accenture, at least, I think, had a lot more adult leadership. I think they're doing. But even after Accenture took over, you still had the front page of Healthcare.gov was not being encrypted with secure socket layers when you were at least giving your preliminary information.
This is the basic of the basics, Morgan.
This is why I'm so frustrated. This is why people said, "Hey, look, if you were given the chance, would you? How much money would you need?" I said, "I wouldn't take the job. You cannot. This is one of those situations where if you took this project and you tried to work it, you would fail because this thing was built for failure from the very first day when they didn't plan it properly, they didn't fund it properly. But the biggest thing is they didn't hold people accountable properly. And I'm not talking about just throwing people under the bus. I'm talking about if I give you a mission, if I'm clear about the mission, if I give you the responsibility, the accountability, and the authority to carry it out, and we have objectives set and we all agree to those, and you fail to do that, then there has to be consequences for that. And look, anybody who's been an executive at a company or a hiring or firing manager, I've had to manage people out before. It's not fun to do. You don't like messing with people's lives. But at some point, you realize they're not happy there. You've got to move them on. Well, at some point on a project like this, when there's incompetence, you should not be rewarding incompetence with more money. You should not be rewarding incompetence with more opportunity. You should not be rewarding incompetence, with more government funding. And that's exactly what they were doing. And that's the part as a taxpayer, I was offended that they were, here's my point. In the civilian government, military is a little different because I think they have some better processes. But at least in the civilian government, I just simply asked people, I said, name the program that the government runs that you think is the model of efficiency. Is it Amtrak? Is it quasi-federal, the post office? Is it Social Security? Is it the IRS? I mean, Name me one program that you think is the model of efficiency that could teach the private sector how to do business.
You're anti-American. Come on, just trust the system.
If you saw the check I sent in April 17th, 18th actually, because the 15th, right, was a Friday, 16th was a federal holiday in D.C. Yeah, if you saw the check I sent the 18th, no, if I was anti-American, I wouldn't have sent that check. I'm just, you know what I am? I'm anti-incompetence. I'm anti-idiot. There are some good people. Trust me, there are some good people in government. I've worked with a lot of them. There are some staffers up there that bust their butt. Look, it's not the senators and the congressmen who should be getting the kudos. It's the people who do all these thankless jobs behind the scenes that do the research to make the congressmen and women look good, or the members of the senators look good. Those are the people really doing it. But you know what? After a while, you get trapped as well. You get trapped into where it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. There's not enough money to do it. What are we going to do? Well, all we need to do is survive for another day. So everybody's hunkered down. They have this bunker mentality, and they're just trying to survive until tomorrow. And that is and I think that's what people are rebelling against from a political standpoint, and other stuff is they're tired of business as usual. And it's been too long business as usual. And you're seeing it now in the way Congress appropriates money and the things that they consider important and the things that they don't. If it's important, you fund it.
Maybe we'll have to have a part 2 conversation. And the part 2 conversation that I'm imagining is I'd really like to pick your mind. Every way we can think of to get people off the grid, so to speak. What are the exact ways that you can offer? Because you've seen this for a long time over the course of your career, to get people off the grid, outside the tentacles as best they can, or to at least minimize the target area. I think that'd be a great. I think we could fill an hour of that really fast.
Ted Kaczynski is a case study on that, but he still got caught too. So there are some. As again, nothing is ever perfect, but that would be an interesting discussion to have in this day and age. And there's been some reporters who have tried that.
Morgan, where's the best place we can send people?
Cash is good. You can send that. No, actually, there's 2 sites. My site where I do a lot of my training and where I can be free and talk about things is identitySecurity.com. That's my site where I do a blog twice a week. You can find me on Twitter at Morgan Wright _US. So every single day, I'm curating content and tweets, finding things that I think affect, how to beat hackers, scammers, and thieves. And then my professional site where I do strategy work, keynote speaking, product launches, marketing engagements is morganwright.us. If you can't find me, you're not trying hard enough. I'm out there. Just Google my name. I'll pop up somewhere.
Morgan, I appreciate you taking some time today. Great insights.
Hey, no, look, I love this conversation. I love getting into a lot more richer details and some thinking behind this, because I think it's important people put their thought process behind this. I love the way that you're asking questions, stimulating discussion. I think if more people did that and just did not believe nothing of what you hear and half of what you see, if we can get people just start doing that, we'll make people inherently and businesses inherently safer.
Morgan, fight the power.
Power to the people.
See you, man. Take care.
Okay, Michael. Thank you, sir.
I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.